Hi, my name is Mica Akullian. I'm a holistic counselor, and I'm going to share a story of a Kundalini awakening that I had about 10 years ago. I've been counseling since that time, and I have never made a video in all these years, so this is the first video that I'm making. And the reason I'm making it now is because I feel like I want to connect with a wider audience, share some more of my experiences, and hopefully provide some inspiration and some guidance for other people who might be going through something similar to what I went through. So those of you who are unfamiliar with the idea of a Kundalini awakening, it's where a large amount of energy is released from lower parts of your body and it moves up to your crown and out of your crown chakra. And at the time I had no idea what a Kundalini awakening was. I'd never heard of one. The situation was I was at a Buddhist lecture with my friend, and we had just gotten finished with the lecture. We were sitting in her car, and I started to feel a little strange. She went into the grocery store to get something, and when she came back is like right when it started to happen. And initially the feeling was like this vibration, like sort of like my butt cheeks were asleep. It was a vibration in the base of my spine, and it kind of started to grow in intensity. And so I paused and I turned to my friend and I said, something's happening. And that was the last thing that I was able to consciously control coming out of me, because at that point then my body started to like freeze up. My arms and my legs like went out in front of me and like tightened up, and the energy continued to grow and then began moving up my spine. I could feel it moving up into my intestines and my stomach, up into my chest, and it felt like the feeling as if a body part was asleep and has that like really intense vibration feeling, but it was like swirling. I could feel swirling around. And then when it got to my heart, there was this big release of grief and at the same time like ecstasy. So I felt really sad. I started crying, and then I also was really happy. I felt this like bliss. It was the weirdest sensation because it was so conflicting. I was also real scared. So I was having this intense emotional experience and then also feeling fear because I didn't understand what was going on. And again, my hands were out in front of me. They were locked up. My feet were like out in front of me, locked up, and I couldn't really move. I tried to turn to look at my friend. I could just barely turn to see her. She was kind of freaked out. So big explosion in my heart, a lot of like positive emotion and grief kind of emotion, and then it continued up into my throat and it went up into my head. And at that point, it was like really intense. Like it was just this like pulsing, buzzing feeling that was like almost incapacitating, and I started to get really scared. And at that point I heard a little voice in the back of my head that said, just let go. And so for whatever reason, I just trusted the voice and I relaxed my body, and then right when I like released, the energy just like shot out of my crown, and I could feel the energy just leave my body, and I like slumped over and I was like shaking. And also during that time I was making these sounds with my mouth which I couldn't control. My mouth was like I started making these wailing sounds. So it was a pretty like intense, visceral experience, somatic kind of thing. Body was shaking, and I think it probably lasted for a minute or two. I don't really remember the time frame, but probably a minute or two. So then after that, my friend took me to her house and put me on the couch, and I felt so strange. I had alternating feelings of like total exhaustion combined with like this feeling like I wanted to celebrate, like I wanted to just jump up and dance around. And a couple times I tried to get up. I was so excited. I wanted to talk to my friend. I tried to get up, and as soon as I did, I was like, oh, I could barely stand, and I had to lay back down. And then for about 2 days afterwards, I was like a wreck. It was sort of like a hangover kind of feeling. So I basically just relaxed and kind of took care of myself, and tried to figure out what happened to me. My friend then, a couple days later, the same friend texted me and said, you might want to Google Kundalini awakening. So I did. I went and looked up Kundalini awakening, and it was like amazing how it fit the description of what I'd been through like almost perfectly, like losing control of your body, like making wailing sounds, the shaking, the energy moving up the spine. So it confirmed the message my friend sent me, and that's when I began researching into what a Kundalini awakening was and like why it potentially happened to me. So that was kind of like the beginning of the whole journey for me, but it wasn't like after that point it actually got more challenging. I went through a period of time where everything was very dark, like a lot of dark imagery, whether it was like memories from past lives or I don't really know what it was, probably from the collective too, the collective field, just picking up processing trauma from the collective field, but it was a lot of alternating like bliss and terror, grief, sadness, joy, just like this wide range of emotional experience, and it would happen really quickly. I'd look at something or I'd hear a sound and it would like trigger some deep memory. Imagery would arise and it would feel overwhelming, real intense emotions, and that lasted for years actually. And even now, 10 years later, I still feel the residual effect of all that. I've learned to navigate it, and like I feel like I've processed a lot of it, because what happened after that initial outpouring of all that stuff, which was like the first couple months, it was really intense. I started to recognize that there was something inside of me that I was holding on to that was contributing to the negative feelings that I was having. So some of it I felt was mine, some of it I felt was more related to the collective. So I began doing different emotional release techniques. I started dancing a lot, ecstatic dance, yoga, lots of different somatic practices to help release that energy that was like trapped inside my body. So that went on for like a year that I did those practices, and I had some amazing kind of release experiences, a lot of crying, a lot of grieving, and that definitely lightened the load of it, like took the pressure off me, and I had a lot of insights about myself, my patterns, and my behaviors, and it was a great opportunity for me to start changing some of those patterns. But the biggest challenge of all that was that there was no resources. There were very few resources for me to turn to, and I didn't know anyone that had been through a Kundalini awakening. Sometimes you hear people that have had some kind of Kundalini experience, and then you read about it or listen to their video, and it's kind of more of a mild kind of experience. And then there's folks who go through like a real intense one, and mine just happened to be really intense. So it's a different level of whatever that is. It's like bringing up more stuff, I think, because the folks who I've seen on videos and read about who have had more of the mild experience don't describe the same level of like psychological anguish and suffering. So yeah, it was pretty intense and didn't have anybody to really turn to. But I did start studying like energy practices, started doing Tai Chi, yoga, started fasting. I realized that when I fasted, it would like calm my mind way down, which was a tool, but then I also began misusing that and started becoming kind of addicted to fasting and other little things that I would do to kind of escape the experiences that I was having. So in the Western model, this would all be considered, psychosis probably, or some kind of like psychotic episode, I guess. And I was trained as a therapist. I have a master's in counseling. So I kind of was holding that awareness that there was this model for my experience that was like a kind of a negative, or a model that supported the dysfunction of the experience I was going through. Because it was a very fragmented, dysfunctional kind of experience, but it wasn't abnormal, it's not unhealthy, it's actually very healthy, and it's what it's helping to do, and this is what I feel now, 10 years later, is that it cleared away so much of this psychic and emotional garbage that I collected in this life and other lifetimes that actually kept me feeling separate, kept me feeling more disconnected. And so the process of releasing all that stuff simultaneously helped me feel more connected to myself, to life around me, to the greater energy that's in the universe,